Hello, Yorcians! I'm Lakeel Bravestone, and welcome back to another episode of Remnants of our Realm. Last week we looked back at Camp Bearded Rock, Cassiopeia Hollow, Underwear Slots, and Titan. Just once again, I want to thank you all for your continued support both on Patreon and on our Discord server. It's much appreciated. Let's move on to the episode. Our first location was naturally teased on our Patreon page, and lo and behold, it's Quarrymill. Quarrymill was a hamlet located to the northeast of South Shroud, with Camp Tranquil as its closest Aetheryte camp, and Silent Arbor as the closest teleport point. Quarrymill was another one of those intended hamlet defense locations that never saw any use. Quarrymill was established as a quarrying point in the year 1077 of the 6th Astral Era, after the Gilmorans finally managed to commune with the elementals and get permission to live in the Black Shroud. Quarrymill was to provide the required materials to construct the city-state of Gridania. In many ways, this is where most of Gridania's structures were born. Quarrymill also acted as a place of judgment, where all outsiders had to present themselves if they wished to dwell in the Twelves Wood. The hamlet was clearly intended to become a hamlet defense location, but sadly this would never come to pass. The hamlet had a carpenter's guild building, a leatherworking guild house, and a botanist guild house in place. Due to not being directly tied to anything important, Quarrymill served only as a cool place to explore, and a few quests used it as a backdrop, but the actual hamlet never saw any use. It had no vendors, menders, or achievement NPCs. Today, however, Quarrymill has evolved into a large fortress-like settlement, overwhelmed with Alamegan and Calamity-related refugees seeking to settle in Gridania. An Aetheryte was raised in the hamlet, making it a bustling teleport hub. After the Calamity, the ground blew open close to Quarrymill, revealing cave tunnels below the ground. The Gilmoran residential district, today known as Palace of the Dead. Because of Palace of the Dead, Quarrymill is always full of players eager to level their classes and possibly get some new weapons and a mount. The South Shroud underwent massive changes as well from 1.0 to 2.0, but Quarrymill's position remains more or less the same, being located to the northeast. In addition to the Aetheryte, the camp boasts its own Chocobo Keep, Mender, numerous vendors, a Leave Meat, and a Delivery Moogle. What an upgrade! But Quarrymill was not the only hamlet in the 1.0 Black Shroud. On the opposite side of Quarrymill, you'd find Hurstmill, a hamlet located in the east of North Shroud. It was one of the few hamlets that did see a lot of activity, mainly because this was the first ever hamlet defense location added to the game. Because I've already explained how a hamlet defense worked in The Fallen Rise of Final Fantasy XIV Episode 4, I won't go into detail about the actual system here. The hamlet had a goldsmith's guild building and an armorer's guild building. The hamlet also had a mender, vendor, and an achievement NPC. This was by far the most popular hamlet in Eorzea, and remained the most popular hamlet until the Calamity struck. Today, Hyrstmill is obviously no longer a hamlet defense location, but it still remains a very relevant area to this day. It didn't get its own Aetheryte crystal, but it does have a Chocobo Keep, Delivery Moogle, and several vendors. And of course, we can't forget about Geralt and his relic weapons. We'll get back to him in a later episode, don't worry. Safe to say, both the Black Shroud hamlets survived the Calamity with their dignity intact. Unless you didn't realize, this episode's theme is the Black Shroud, and there is an open world dungeon here that we haven't explored. The Tam-Tara Deepcroft. The Tam-Tara Deepcroft was located in central Shroud just south of Camp Bent Branch. Now, so far in this series, we have explored Leave dungeons, where Leave quests dominated the progression of the dungeon, and free dungeons where keys had to be found off monsters to unlock chests spread around the dungeon, but the Tam-Tara Deepcroft does not fall into any of these categories. Instead, the Tam-Tara Deepcroft was nothing more than a grinding dungeon. With no actual goal inside, no leave meat, no hidden keys or coffers, the Tam-Tara Deepcroft was simply just a continuation of the Black Shroud with slightly higher monster density. The Tam-Tara Deepcroft had an ethereal gate connected to Camp Bent Branch, and the dungeon itself was spread across 2 floors, or rings as they were referred to in-game. The ring being the circular room you see here going around a giant tree. And I'm sure you've already gathered this is more or less just the corridors and rooms from Totorak. That is exactly what it is. The Tam-Tara Deepcroft was nothing more than a Totorak rip-off dungeon. So what did Tam-Tara have to offer? Well, despite the dungeon's somewhat boring layout and lack of any actual goal, it did serve as a very efficient way of grinding EXP, as the dungeon was filled to the brim with black efts that yielded high amounts of EXP for players between level 25 to 30. So that's exactly what it was used for in 1.0, a grindfest dungeon. Today though, the Tam-Tara Deepcroft is completely changed. There is very little, if anything, left of the original design, with the exception of these small chambers that were scattered around the map in 1.0. Names of some of the chambers in the 1.0 Tam-Tara is also present, among them is the tomb of King Galvanth the Dominator. It is now an instance dungeon with a light party requirement and unlocks at level 17. Quite a fall from its level 25 plus days in 1.0. Now for this last part, we're going to dive into a mysterious location that often caught adventurers in 1.0 off guard. I speak, of course, of Amberscale Rock. This little gem of a location was located to the west of Central Shroud and was basically a cave entrance just like any other cave entrances in the Black Shroud. But walk inside and you'd find this. This is the Amberscale Rock. Shaped like a dragon, encased in this amber-like substance similar to what we found around the Gelmora ruins, which we explored in episode 1. It was briefly featured in the level 30 Conjurer quest, but its origin and purpose was never properly explained. There was also a conjurer named Maurice who lost all his memories when the Green Wrath took him. That seems to be connected to this rock. You first meet Maurice in the questline Good Night, Sweet Dreams, where Maurice comes out of the woods to alert you that something is happening further inside the woods. Elementals have gone mad and you must fight your way through the forest. Together with Maurice, you locate a wounded knight on the ground. Maurice tends to his wounds and you return to the Conjurer's Guild where you learn of Maurice's memory loss. You also learn that the wounded knight was an Ishgardian knight that seemed to have stumbled into the Black Shroud. Upon meeting the now healed Ishgardian knight of House Durandare, he tells you he claimed to have seen a dragon in the woods. You enter an echo, and this is what you see. The next time you meet Maurice is in the Conjurer quest, The Call of Nature, where your next phase of conjuring training begins, hearing the elementals. You head to Amberscale Rock. This series of cutscenes would prove to be more mysterious and creepy than any of the other cutscenes I've ever seen in 1.0. There are several reasons for this. First off, when Mori meets you outside Amberscale Rock's cave, he says, "The voice. Your voice. Have you called?" But we have not called. Our character just made it to the cave. Upon answering no, he gets confused. Something cold. It gets stranger. As Maurice explains that his memory was lost to the Green Wrath, he also says that he feels a pull to Ishgard. He suddenly decides to go to Ishgard and asks for your help. Upon accepting, he immediately starts preparing and agrees to go meet at Camp Emerald Moss. As you both leave, this happens. This series of cutscenes will forever stand out to me as the most confusing and mysterious questline in Final Fantasy XIV 1.0. The Elementals tells him to wait. But for what? After this questline was completed, it was never referenced again in 1.0. It remained an unresolved mystery. One would think that such a minuscule point of interest in 1.0 would be completely gone in 2.0, but no. In 2.0, the structure still stands in the central Shroud. However, the storyline is never further explored in A Realm Reborn, and Maurice is nowhere to be found. Did he die in the Calamity? Did he make it to Ishgard? What is Amberscale Rock? Is it a dragon? The biggest clue can be found in the 1.0 story, The Boy and the Dragon Gay, which strongly suggests that Maurice might be the boy in this tale. The story was loosely explained in the 1.0 quest with the same name, but it can be found again in the Great Gubal Library Hard in Heavensward. The story goes: The Boy and the Dragon Gay. Once upon a time, there lived a free-spirited boy who loved to play in the forest with his pet Chocobo. But the forests were fraught with peril, and one day a band of brigands ambushed the boy, spiriting him away to the harsh mountains of the north. Yet there be dragons there, and thus they rode up the mountain path. One of the majestic beasts came swooping down from the heavens. The boy's chocobo reared in fright, sending the boy tumbling down the mountainside to his nigh certain demise. And yet the gods saw fit to spare his life, if only meagerly so. As he lay there, battered and broken, all manner of foul beasts drew near, threatening to rip him limb from limb. Just as the boy was making his peace with the 12, another dragon appeared. A smaller creature, yes, but even a small dragon is a fearsome opponent indeed. It was then that the strangest thing happened. With a mighty roar, the dragon turned upon the circling beasts and spit forth a burst of flames that reduced them to so much ash, saving the poor boy's life. With what half seemed like a smile, the dragon approached the wounded child and gently raised him up to sit upon his back, and the two flew off to the gods know where. Since we know practically nothing of how Maurice ended up in the woods and why he felt so connected to the rock, this story might actually line up. The wolf scene may very well have happened later after the story of the boy and the dragon gay ends. However, how the dragon got trapped in the rock remains a mystery. The questline has stuck with me for a long time, and I often find myself thinking back on this questline and wondering to myself what it all meant. Very interesting stuff, and a clear remnant from 1.0 that still sort of remains a mystery. And on that note, we've reached the end of the episode. Time flies when you're having fun, I guess. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more Final Fantasy XIV stuff. Let me know in the comments what you think of the topics in this video. Did Quarrymill deserve the upgrade? Do you want pure open grind dungeons like the 1.0 Tam-Tara back? And what are your theories about Amberscale Rock? I'm very interested to hear about that. I'll be back next week with another episode of Remnants of a Realm. May you ever walk in the light of the crystal.